Hello, and welcome back to the Sparkling Scholars. In today's U.S. history lesson, we're going to be talking about the changes made during the Gilded Age. So, what are we waiting for? Let's dive right in. Not everyone in America was wealthy during the Gilded Age. Many people had middle class incomes, and many Americans living in tenement housing were very poor. A young woman in Chicago formed a plan to help immigrants in these poor living conditions. Her name was Jane Addams. Jane Addams started Hull House in 1889. Hull House was one of several settlement houses in big cities. It was a settlement house especially for women. At Hull House, immigrant women could get nursing care, food, and clothing for their families. They could take classes in English, cooking, art, sewing, and American government. They could also attend concerts and plays and visit libraries. Hull House even offered childcare for immigrant children. It was a safe place for the immigrant women to find the help they needed for their new life in America. Jane Addams was born in Cedarville, Illinois on September 6, 1860. She began attending Rockford Female Seminary in 1877 and graduated 3 years later. Addams wanted to use what she had learned. After visiting a settlement house that served very poor people in London, Addams decided to set up a similar one in Chicago. Addams and a friend rented a rundown mansion in an area where many immigrants lived. They named their settlement house the Hull House. They set up daycare center, a kindergarten, a boys club, a coffee shop, an employment bureau, an art gallery, and libraries. Classes in English, citizenship, theater, music, and art were taught at the Hull House. Adams began a campaign to improve working conditions in sweatshops. She was given an honorary degree at Yale University and even won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1931. She inspired others to set up houses like the Hull House across the country. Let's talk about the child labor reform. Many immigrant children were not able to go to school. Instead, they had to help support their families. By the year 1900, more than 1 million children and teens worked in factories. People began to realize that national laws about child labor would help this situation. Labor unions and reform workers began asking for these laws to be put into place. They wanted limits on the number of hours a child could work. They wanted laws to decide at what age a child could begin working. Some states already had these laws, but many Americans felt that there needed to be national laws about child labor. Americans were concerned about the child labor because many children worked long hours in dangerous conditions. Often the children were underpaid for the work that they did. Because of the long working hours, they could not attend school. Eventually, laws would be passed to forbid employing children to work in dangerous jobs, and that set limits on the age of the children and the number of hours that they could work. In addition, the increasing prosperity that resulted from inventions and labor saving devices was spreading through all classes of society. That was making child labor progressively less cost effective. It cost the businesses too much money to employ children when there was these inventions such as the shoe laster that would do the work faster and for cheaper. Rising wages meant families were under less pressure to send their children off to work. A major difference between developed and underdeveloped societies is the number of children who work. Some people wonder if the government should pass laws that limit child labor. Let's talk about rights for women. During the Gilded Age, life for women in America was changing. Many women worked outside the home, especially in factories. More and more women received an education. More women than ever before were concerned about their rights. Most states did not allow women to vote. but women were American citizens. Many women thought that they should have a say in their government just as men did. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony spoke out the most openly for women's rights. However, both of them also openly rejected verses in God's word about women. Many other women who loved God and respected the Bible believed that they should be able to vote. The need for women's suffrage or voting rights was slowly becoming more accepted. The drive for women's suffrage began before the Civil War. Throughout the late 1800s, women suffragettes campaigned for the right to vote. Women suffragettes is a fancy term for saying the people who wanted women to be able to vote. Led by women such as Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, the crusade for women's suffrage was part of an overall campaign for equal rights for women. You see, back in the 1800s, women didn't have the same rights that they do today. They couldn't vote, they couldn't have their own bank account. It was all made for men. Susan B. Anthony's campaign for voting rights got the most attention. Although she died 14 years before it was ratified, means put into place, the 19th Amendment is often called the Anthony Amendment in her honor. Stanton published a women's Bible that left out verses that she considered offensive to women. Anthony made a statement that she believed women's equality should extend to roles in the church. Both women were considered founders of the modern feminist movement. Let's talk about health and nutrition during the Gilded Age. Disease was a major problem in the late 1800s, especially in large cities. Tenement housing was only one reason for this. Another was a lack of knowledge about nutrition. You see, people did not know which foods had the vitamins and minerals that they needed. They also did not have proper ways of storing the food and keeping it from spoiling. People were just beginning to understand that germs and bacteria could make them sick. Scientists were trying new ways to kill bacteria in meats and dairy foods. One important change was the way of treating milk. Farmers would bring raw milk into the cities to sell, but this milk carried harmful bacteria. The milk needed special treatment before being sold. This treatment was called pasteurization. Milk was heated to almost boiling, and then the heat would kill off the bacteria. Then the milk was cooled very quickly to keep new bacteria from growing. Drinking pasteurized milk kept people from getting certain diseases. Tuberculosis, diphtheria, and typhoid could all be caused by drinking raw milk. The change in treating milk helped people live healthier lives. Milk provides many nutritional benefits, but raw milk can cause some of these health risks. Unpasteurized milk is more likely to cause illness than pasteurized milk. A man by the name of Louis Pasteur developed pasteurization in 1862. Batch pasteurization was the first one developed to kill the pathogen that caused tuberculosis. Batch pasteurization was a low temperature and it was a long time process. Pasteurizers which used a high temperature, short time process were produced in 1882. There was a little difference in the taste between pasteurized and unpasteurized milk. Let's think about this for a moment. How did Jane Addams help immigrants? We learned about that at the beginning of the lesson. Well, that's all for this video. Until next time, stay sparkly, little scholars, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Sparkling Scholars channel.